This week, Pravi Devineni from Duke Energy is with us to discuss AI. Then Matthew Toussaint from Open Security joins us to talk about vulnerability management life cycles. Finally, in the enterprise security news, lots of funding but no acquisitions, new companies, new tools, including a SecOps Chrome plugin and a Chrome plugin that tells you the price of enterprise software, prompt engineering tips from Google, being an Innovation Sandbox finalist will cost you, security brutalism, CVE dumpster fires, and a heartwarming story about a dog because we need to end on something happy. Things are getting grim. All that and more in this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. This episode is sponsored by Fastly, the application security leader and edge cloud platform behind many top digital experiences. Fastly helps organizations deliver and secure online experiences for their end users through a modern, developer-friendly approach to security. With their next-gen WAF, bot management, and DDoS protections, teams have the tools they need to ensure their applications and APIs perform at their best without sacrificing speed or reliability. Discover how Fastly transforms security into an enabler for digital innovation at securityweekly.com/Fastly. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National High Five Day, something none of us can do because we're all remote and we're on a podcast together. Maybe the next version of the Apple Vision Pro will include some kind of haptic high five. I don't know. We'll find some way to do it remotely. This is episode 403, recorded on Thursday, April 17th, 2025. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me is the Admiral of ASPM, the Captain of Content, Katie Teitler-Santullo. How are you doing?
I am well.
Also joining us is the Dean of Data Science, the Knight of Neurodiversity, the Watcher of Data Center Waste, Jackie McGuire. How you doing, Jackie?
I'm great. I'm in an office, which actually feels really weird. But yeah, other than that, I'm okay.
Yeah, I love the fit, love the hair, and you got office vibes going on.
I'm like the cool secretary. Not like Maggie Gyllenhaal, though, because I look like her, and that could be really, really misconstrued.
I had not made that connection, but now you put that in my head, and it's probably never going to leave.
Good luck hosting from here on out.
All right. Quick announcement, then we'll get to the interview. Identiverse 2025 is returning to Las Vegas June 3rd through 6th. You can hear from over 250 expert speakers and connect with over 3,000 identity security professionals across 4 days of keynotes, breakout sessions, and deep dives into the latest identity security trends. Plus, take part in hands-on workshops and explore the brand new Non-Human Identity Pavilion. You can register now and save 25% with code IDV25-SecurityWeekly at securityweekly.com/IDV2025. All right, today's topic is AI. We are something we've never talked about before on the show.
A what? Or is it A1?
Let me explain what that stands for. Now, we're excited to have Dr. Pravi Devineni, a lead AI scientist at Duke Energy, with us today. Pravi is an applied data scientist with over 7 years of experience working with domain experts to provide machine learning solutions. Welcome, Pravi.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So, yeah, I think with some posts, and we also know some people in common that kind of led me to reaching out and asking you to come on the show. I often leap at an opportunity to have somebody either security adjacent or started out outside security. We do get in a bit of a bubble here, so it's always great to hear some different perspectives on things. And that's kind of where I want to start today is you were doing AI before it was cool or before it was a lot of things, right? Like AI has been through so many changes over the years. And in fact, I don't know how true this is, but I have heard in my research on the history of AI, which goes back nearly as far as computing itself, we've had two AI winters. And like the quickest way to get your grant canceled or defunded was to mention artificial intelligence. So that is part of the reason that machine learning became a term I heard in the 90s, was to avoid using the term artificial intelligence. I don't know how true that is.
Possibly. One of the first memories of, I mean, AI is more to me a newer term from what I have seen. And whenever we think AI, I used to think deep learning. And this was even like 5 years ago because generative AI came, suddenly AI became this umbrella term. And I remember machine learning, data mining, information retrieval were all the common terms. And then AI was used as like this whole Jeffrey Hinton, they were all doing neural networks. That was the only AI that we used to refer to. And the first machine learning algorithm or data mining algorithm I remember was this: how do you buy two like products that need to be bought together? How can shops order things that are in demand? Like that was the first data mining problem that we actually learned. And uh, they call that, like, if somebody bought diapers, somebody bought like milk, which
Mm-hmm.
how should they use that information of buying patterns to order inventory? That's the first data mining slash machine learning algorithm that in one of the first textbooks I ever learned about this. So, and a second thing I remember is when I was interviewing for internships back in 2012, 2013, they used to ask this question, like, what is the difference between data mining, machine learning, and AI? And we had to answer that question as at the beginning of the interview.
Mm-hmm.
Now we talk to leadership. Everybody's like, oh yeah, even my mother-in-law who's 65 knows, oh, apparently ChatGPT answers everything. Everyone knows AI. And like that's the umbrella term. And even when we talk, I go to present to talk to people now. I use, okay, there's AI, there's machine learning, there's deep learning, and then inside that bubble is somewhere generative AI. I have to explain that. So even the definition of how that has evolved, the 10-year period has changed quite a bit. So
As a
I have,
fellow
Yeah.
data scientist, I also found it a little bit frustrating when AI took over. And it was like, I was like, man, I really wish LLMs hadn't co opted AI, because there's so many other applications for AI and machine learning that aren't LLMs and aren't expensive like LLMs. My big fear riding this wave is that we're going to go into this trough of disillusionment, and it'll impact machine learning as a whole, not just large language models.
yeah. And that's something we actually talk as a business. Somebody I recently had, I mean, I am in the power utilities business and I work with a lot of, we collaborate with other utilities to talk, what is our strategy? What's going on? Where are you using AI? And somebody said, oh, why did you use AI for this particular problem? Or why did you use this narrow traditional AI for this particular problem? I said, when you use LLMs, and let's say we bring in AWS, it's a centralized problem. And this is a very narrow problem where the data is very clean and not biased. So traditional AI is fairly good for this one because this is not a repetitive thing. For that one, we have to think long-term funding, long-term maintenance, and this is not that kind of problem. So that is something we try to actually bring as much education to our leadership and any people we talk to about what is traditional AI versus what is generative AI. And we have to repeat that every day in the work we do.
Yeah, in fact, we're going to get into it a little bit later in this interview, but just the term AI safety. I think before ChatGPT came out, if you said that, you would think about autonomous cars, hitting pedestrians, maybe, right? Or avoiding objects in the road, and then after it, all of a sudden, it's become this, this measure of how much bias or just natural poisoning is built into the models, right?
It was more focused in the data at that time. They were actually not thinking about model per se, but if you remember some of the documentaries that came out about AI bias from MIT, Joy, that's her name is Dr. Joy. It's called Coded Bias, and this is the documentary on Netflix where they came up with, oh yeah, if you are going to have a facial recognition algorithm, and there are more representative group of like certain races, certain genders, and it was able to do. They had more representation of the data, and like let's say African Americans has low representation, so it was constantly mislabeling, and this information, especially from Amazon,
Yeah,
was being sold to these organizations like emergency, like police stations, and those
law enforcement.
organizations for law enforcement. Yeah. They were actually being sold that one, and there was a huge documentary on more from the data perspective and how these models are biased. But the say LLM suddenly brought in like this whole idea of safety that was not based in data.
And one
And
of the things that I think is unfortunate is that people confuse mathematical bias with like principal bias or character bias or things like that. And so it's almost hard to talk about bias as a data scientist now because people don't understand that you're actually talking about the numbers, not something cultural or with as contentious as things are. I was going to submit a talk for Black Hat about bias in data science, but I just could not figure out a way to write it where people wouldn't interpret it as cultural bias. And granted, they are often one and the same, but it's almost like it's taken on this very specific term that is not actually what it means in data science.
absolutely, because when we think of bias as a general term, as a normal term, we think of it as like sociocultural, something about that biased or bias towards them. And right now, the way we define it, especially in the AI safety space, or when I write AI standards, we think of it as, is the population that you're sampling representative of the real distribution of the population? How do we know if it's biased? What are you handling to do? Like, what are you doing so you can handle this kind of like imbalance in the data if there is no good representation? So it's a very different way of like educating people on the same words, but in a mathematical and in a data science context.
So, for those of us who are more consumers of AI than actually working with it, I tend to think of machine learning in terms of things that are behind the scenes, right? Like it's typically AI I don't interact directly with. It just makes things smoother. Like, when my thumbs are hitting the virtual keyboard on my smartphone, I know they're hitting the wrong places, and there is some model there like cleaning that up for me. The same way when I talk to an AI assistant, the voice recognition, just things like that. Whereas this technology is so different. The large language models and the fact that we interact with most of them through prompts, through conversational prompts, has just it just changed the experience from people who consume AI technology rather than work directly with it. And I wonder again, from your perspective, how do you look at these models? Aside from just the obvious difference of how you interact with them, directly versus indirectly. And you were kind of talking about a hierarchy, like how do you see them as related to each other under the large blanket of everything we call AI, from expert systems on up to large language models? Like where does it all fit in? I don't know if that's a good question or not.
It's a very big umbrella question. Where does it all fit in? So maybe I'll give you like what I actually tell somebody who's more of the consumer of AI or it's hiring, because I remember I work in a field where people are worried about, like, as a technical person, I'm like, okay, we are trying to help you make better decisions. And when I go to them, and these are like technical nuclear workers on the field or people in the field, we have to, okay, AI is going to help you make better decisions. It is augmented intelligence. It is not going to take your job. It does not involve any work reduction. We just want to have better processes. So that is something I have to go in and actually assure. So it's a
Mhm.
collaborative effort to solve the problems that they care about or that can make their life easier. And in the large scheme of things, how do they all fit together is you have no choice but to get better at it, but to get comfortable with it. That's how I tell them, and that's how I think about it. And a big part of what we are doing, especially in the utilities organization, every AI that we do needs to have a human in the loop process. Everything is safety related. If any difference that it makes is it affects that customer safety, CSAT, that's one of the metrics that they use in utility, is like customer safety. How much is interruptions? What is the duration? So these are all directly affecting the end customers of electricity. So we have to ensure that there is a human in the loop. There are some incident response. What does it look like? All of that information. So we try to make sure that we are educating the people and ensure that you just don't have a choice, because this is going to help you make more efficient decision making. And also we come up with so many trainings to ensure that, to make sure that they know how to use it responsibly. So that's where it fits more from the business perspective. And from a personal perspective, I'm actually very excited for how much the field is growing. I never would have thought, like 10 years ago, suddenly everyone would be using ChatGPT for this. And I have been to a Women in Data Science conference. I met a veteran. She was in the Navy for 15 years, and she just finished her undergrad in IT, information technology, and she was saying, I would never, I am not a good, I was never good in high school. But once I actually started learning and how to find better intuition, I was able to complete my undergrad within 3 years with having two kids, because I had this as an education tool. So I think it completely is going to help us get better, but we also have to be really focused on responsible AI. So that is where I think I've seen a lot more positive examples than I have seen negative examples. Maybe I'm also not coming from the security side. So I'm very optimistic
Right.
about it.
So, speaking about that, this woman who you met, who is now able to do something she never thought she would be able to do because of AI and all the other acronyms around it. There is always going to be a fear that this technology, the entire bucket of it, is going to displace jobs. In a way, that's true, because like you said, we all have to know about it. If you don't, you're purposefully not advancing your own skills. So how can people who want to learn more about it, aside from just, playing around with ChatGPT and all the others, how can they learn more about it? What if they want to either enter the career as a newbie or transition using other skills? What are some of the ways people can really start to understand and experiment with it to perhaps explore a future helping to grow it and perfect it and make it really reliable?
That's a very broad question, and I'm thinking about
Sorry.
it. No, it's good. It's a fantastic question. So I will always start from YouTube. We don't even have to, because
That's how I did it.
you fear what you don't know. I think that's the whole point, right? And by the way, I have her on my LinkedIn, and she told me her husband is so skeptical about it. She works in the Charlotte Fire Department. She
Mhm.
was so skeptical about it, and she's teaching the fire workers how to use this, how to be this, and be more responsible about it. And she told me this. The same person told me my husband is skeptical, and she said, "Like, and he said to her, like, get with the program, you will learn better," and all of that. So I think with people, more for like, start with YouTube, because my understanding is, you fear what you don't understand. You fear what
Mhm.
you don't
Yeah.
know. That's where you get skeptical. And once you realize, and there's this Jensen Huang's famous quote that, hey, people like AI won't replace people, but the people who know AI will replace people who don't know AI, right? So that's the
Mhm.
whole quote, and that became very true lately. And when, for the basic skills, do you know how to use a computer, is one of the basic skills, which like 20 years ago nobody asked about that. So
One of the interesting statistics I saw was talking about how Gen X is actually handling the AI revolution better than Gen Z and millennials and Gen Alpha, because we've been through the PC revolution, we've been through the internet
Yeah.
revolution, we've been through all these different disruptive technologies that we're going to take
Things were
every.
always changing. Yeah.
Yeah, and they did. I worked for Circuit City. I worked for Radio Shack. Those places don't exist anymore because of Amazon and other online retailers, but I don't think they take specific jobs. I don't think they net take jobs from the economy. They just change the nature of the balance of machine work versus human work. And I think that's kind of a better way to look at it than it's going to take your job. Is like, well, a lot of your job is going to be done by your computer, which is the same. I was a stockbroker for 15 years, right? I watched go from like writing orders on paper to putting them into a computer to like saying them to my phone and it'll do it for me. So I think it's interesting, but I just want to wholeheartedly agree that YouTube is the best way. So I did not learn calculus until after I graduated from a 6-month data science boot camp. So I did the UC Berkeley data science boot camp and I got all kinds of practical hands-on. Then when I went to go for my first interview, I was like, I only took like psych stats and algebra 2. I don't actually really understand any of the math going on. And I was terrified. But then Andrew Ng, NG, very, very popular data science tutor, had this whole course on calculus for data science. And I went from thinking I was bad at math to having something to apply it to that made sense. And all of a sudden I got calculus when I hadn't, and I was like 32. So yeah, so I think you're right, Adrian, in that we think we don't know things, but a lot of times it's because we learn them when we're 15 with no frame of reference for the world. And when you approach something from the practical application, it's so much easier to start understanding it than trying to start with Wikipedia and figuring out, starting to read about calculus and data science.
Yeah. And
And
it's
okay, go ahead.
go ahead, Pravi.
So I want to add something to the statistics that Jackie mentioned. I work in a company where people have been around for 45, 35, 40 years. And this is like one person like who I work with in my group who's a lead engineer actually was doing a Python programming and he's like, oh, Pravi, I'm learning Python. And he got GitHub Copilot and was learning and he makes plots like electrical engineer of 45 years. And I was talking to him like, oh, that's like, oh yeah, and doing this. Oh, do you need any help with metrics? We were talking. And this is a person who has changed this meter readings, go from paper to going through all of this because Duke is a 124-year-old company. And we have so many lifers who have been working there for 40 plus years, and I meet a lot of them every day. And I personally think having gone through and seeing how much it has made their life easier is something that they really embrace it. I can see that, like from the examples I have seen, I can see them being more receptive, more open to AI than other people because for us, it suddenly changed the life. It suddenly, for us, I think as a millennial, I think, I went from like no internet to constantly being bombarded with information. I don't really like it that much. And for them, they were able to see that, hey, this actually made my life so much better. Remember that time I used to have cards and now I'm actually able to look up information so much better. So yeah, I can definitely see that happening.
Remember when you couldn't check work email unless you were at work? And like every Monday you were just like, oh my God, I'm going to come in and they're going to be, or better yet, remember when you didn't have email at work?
I was just about to say, I don't know about you, but my first couple of jobs, I didn't have email.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, well, and it's true because these kids these days, they don't remember. So they're all scared because all they've ever known is a tablet and a smartphone and a laptop. And it's like, we're going to get through this. There will be the next thing and the human that needs to understand the next thing.
Hey, my husband is younger than me and we were watching Amazing Race the other day. And I said to him, do you know how to read a map? And he said, no. And I was like, so if we go on this, you have to drive, because I started driving with a paper map, one of those paper maps that took up the whole front
you print
seat.
Them out before you took a trip?
Like in the whole front seat. If you got lost, you had to pull over and remap.
Or the Rand McNally things you pick up at a gas station. Yeah,
but then they fold out and then they still take up the whole front seat.
Yeah, I sold Kirby vacuums door to door when I was 18, and I had one of the like 3-inch thick Rand McNallys that you had to go to like the street of the neighborhood. Yeah, so sorry, we're digressing, but
we are digressing. But it's the whole growing up with technology,
our ages, I think,
digital natives, comfort level with these advanced technologies. Like somebody who's probably in, middle school, high school now. 15, 20 years from now, they're in the workplace, and this is just going to be completely normal, a snap to them. It's not going to be a change. It's not going to be weird. It's not going to seem, somebody submits some work and it's very clearly using whatever form of AI. Nobody's going to be like, hey, did you check this? Because it's just going to be inherent in their workflow to know how to use it and how to use it well. I mean, of course, there are going to be issues with certain people who aren't diligent, but for people who are diligent, it's just going to be part of the normal workflow. And nobody's going to think twice about it. Whereas, I don't want to date the co-hosts here, but for people like us, we didn't grow up with it. And learning it now, it's great, it's cool, it's neat, but it's still a change.
Yeah. Yeah, it's well, and it's not an optional change either. It's something
No.
that's just been thrust upon us,
Yeah.
right? Like it just shows up. Now I've got Gemini in my Gmail, right? Like I didn't ask it to be there; it just showed up. I now have AI in Notion. So that's an interesting part, and we'll talk a little bit about AI governance. It's a big challenge there. But yeah, I just wanted to comment. I just finished the book Bullshit Jobs, which I highly recommend. I thought it was just going to be a fun read, kind of pointing out like diving into why bullshit jobs exist and defining what bullshit jobs are, and ended up being more of a review of jobs, why any jobs exist in general. And he goes all the way back through the history of how employment worked hundreds of years ago and how it evolved, and why most of the bullshit jobs out there are these kinds of middle management jobs. And it ends up being kind of a misnomer that that jobs exist and people are hired to complete work or because work needs to be done. So then, reading this book kind of gives you new perspective on technologies like AI. Like, okay, new technologies coming out that make us more efficient. There's not really a direct correlation between that and people getting hired, fired, any of that kind of thing, because it's completely different forces that control that. So highly recommend that if you want to better understand like where jobs come from. But it's and in some places, sure, like with generative AI, I don't think anybody ever needs to sit on hold again. Like there's certain roles. And the thing I actually like about that is the fact that nobody likes doing those jobs anyway. I do like the idea of a technology that kind of takes away the really boring, repetitive tasks that humans get tired. They make mistakes. They don't want to do it in the first place. Maybe that improves raises the bar on the general level of quality of jobs that we do. You can say that, Katie.
I just typed in our Slack that I got a call from an AI agent the other day, and it was awful. I kept getting this call. I knew it was spam, and so I wanted to pick up and say, I'm on the do not call list. And at first, it didn't sound like a computerized voice. And then I tried to interrupt it and realized really quickly that wasn't going to work because it wasn't a human who could react to me. So
you just need
yeah,
an AI phone assistant to answer the AI call for you, and then the AIs can have
Exactly.
that was my next. Yeah,
Why
I
are you
learned
picking up the
very
phone, first
quickly.
of
I
all?
might be an old
What are you
dog,
doing?
but I got a new trick very quickly. Yeah, and the person hung up or the agent hung up the next time. Yes.
Yeah.
The way I do it is if they're calling me, if I don't know the number, if they need me, they'll text me.
I
Yeah.
figured
My
as much,
husband's-
but it literally was 6 or 8 times a day I was getting a call from the same number. So I finally just got aggravated and decided I was going to pick up and say, take me off your list, which worked 5 years ago and doesn't
Literally,
now.
Yeah.
all my husband's voicemail says is, "Why are you calling me? Don't be weird. Send me a text message."
Yeah, except my mother still sometimes calls me. So
Yeah, that's literally all his voicemail says. No
Yeah.
name, no nothing. It's all it says.
calling is weird.
Oh man, we're going to run out of time here. There's so many other things I wanted to ask you, Pravi. Maybe we need to have you on again. I wanted to go into ML ops, and let me try and pick something out of here that we have time to cover. So one of the things, poisoning, I think is a very interesting thing here. Like the nature of like when you're training an ML model, obviously this is something you can worry about, but I don't understand how you can even account for it with generative AI because the training data set is so huge that you have to be indiscriminate with the data that you pull in. So I like to say, like, these foundation models are kind of pre-poisoned. They come pre-poisoned because they've had no choice but to include data that's either intentionally poisoned or it's just poor quality data. So from your perspective, like, how do you even deal with that?
A lot of it. So let's start with that poisoning. Again, we'll have to go back to less about the poisoning, more about the bias. So often, and that's the whole point. Like now, we are getting when we go into Google search, it says generated by AI. Results might be inaccurate, and that's where the
Yeah.
responsible AI and the AI education comes in. Do not
So
trust
that's
it.
it. You just put a disclaimer on it, says this is probably going to be bad.
But you know
Very bad.
what? Just to do a tiny little tangent there, that was always the case. They just now,
Mhm,
because of
Right.
AI, they just now have the
mhm,
disclaimer,
True.
so it's more honest.
mhm. Yep.
Sorry, Pravi.
No, go ahead. So for that one, the poisoning part, I think has to do more with, and in a business context, we actually make sure that we have the right guardrails, and that we also do input sanitization and output sanitization, so it is completely grounded in sources. So I use a lot of Perplexity because it does more of that searching and provides me exactly where it is pulling that answer from. And now I'm actually able to go into that citation and or that web page and find that, but I'm still getting a summary of my answer. And ChatGPT recently did that, but that was my favorite was Perplexity from the beginning because I wanted more sources. So one thing to always do is do not trust like just the answer. Always make sure that whatever you're getting is grounded in sources and identifying is grounded in truth. And you also have to trust the website it's coming from because these are all just crawling and
Right.
summarizing information from you. Do you trust that website? There are so many blogs with information. So that is also one other thing. And poisoning, and that's implied. Bias and poisoning implied. And I can give you an example of what that looks like. When a big outcry that came up is in translation. I'll give you an example of bias. Is in Google Translate, whenever you would for some languages there was no gender assigned to it, so they would say, oh, tell me a description of a nurse. It would always give a nurse to a she or an entrepreneur as a he. And that was an example of bias because that's the kind of data it was trained on. And as you said, these are predisposed to have bias, and I wouldn't particularly call it poisoning because poisoning has to do with the inaccuracy or hallucinations or more intentional misuse of information. So these are more biased in information or providing the wrong information where we have no knowledge of what it was trained on or what it's picking the information
I
from.
Also, it seems like asking it nurse instead of healthcare professional, or something like you can load the questions up and it will happily give you the loaded answer back. Like, you can ask one of these tools, how do you calculate a woman's salary? And oftentimes it'll come back and say, take a man's salary and multiply it by zero point 0.8, right? But you asked it a loaded question in the first place, right? And because it's just kind of parroting things out that it's trained on, predictably, yeah, it's gonna give you that kind of answer. So I think forming good questions, learn. So prompt engineering, I've found is really a thing. And if the results you're getting out of AI seem poor quality, it could be what you're putting in, I think.
Or the model you're using. Not everything needs to be a RAG. And I think that's to your point with not understanding the difference between different types of machine learning models. So there's machine learning, right, which is the ability of computers to take in data, understand it, make projections, predictions. And then within that, there's artificial intelligence, which is using machine learning to replicate thoughts and decision making of a human. Within artificial intelligence, there's there's generative AI, and then within that, there's retrieval augmented generative AI. And so there's all these layers, and because Chat GPT slash Gemini slash whatever is all people know, that's a RAG. It goes out to the internet, it retrieves information, it brings it back, it uses it to generate the response. Most enterprises, like I would get, and not, I don't want to make assumptions, but your company's been around for over half a century. You probably don't need a RAG for a lot of things because you probably already have enough information in the business to create one of those foundational models that doesn't have those risks, right? So I think a lot of this is like we're using RAGs for everything when we don't need to go retrieve information that could be faulty or poisoned.
Absolutely. But a big part of that question that we are coming towards the governance is a lot of these documents are spread all over the place and have different restrictions. So, how comfortable are we exposing and doing this role
Yeah.
based access and everything? So, that's a whole other security aspect that we are looking
Yeah.
at.
Yeah.
So,
One agent access to, yeah. Yeah. Of course, that's going to become the target to attack, right? Like in every organization, that this one ID, this one identity, artificial identity has, God level access to everything. Yeah. So yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah.
a simple
Um,
example. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. We'll pick that up.
no, give your example. Yeah.
A simple example is we are just pushing a lot of the SharePoint information that we have to these RAG agents, as you said, Jackie, is and bunch of people who shouldn't have access or that are deemed private, but
Yeah.
they sometimes shared a link, which means it's being crawled by these RAG agents that should never actually have had this information because people are thinking it's private, but it's actually not. So we are
Yeah.
working on the governance piece, the data governance piece of labeling right now as we speak.
Yeah. Yeah. And to a point made earlier, I forget who made it. This was already a mess before we started. Like the AI is just kind of highlighting the mess that was already there. It's just shining the light on all the data hygiene issues and data governance issues. And now we have to clean it up because it's much more obvious now. We can see it clearly. To wrap up here, Probably, it seems like we're at a point where maybe we're starting to see diminishing returns from new models. They OpenAI just retired 4.5 and rolled back to like a 4 point something lower. And they talked about all the extra energy they had to put into 4.5 and the results benchmark kind of disappointingly. If that's true, and I'm not looking to answer that question of whether that's true or not. What are you excited for the future of this? Because it seems like there's still a lot of adjacencies, like there's still a lot of use cases and areas to explore, maybe with like more focused LLMs. Like I've seen a lot of like specialized ones that are not general purpose, like these big foundation models. But just throwing out some examples there, I'm curious what you're excited for going forward with AI in general. Could be ML, like not necessarily just generative.
So AI in general, again, like I said, I work in an area where we're heavily documentation and regulation oriented. So we work with so much text. And searching itself could save millions of dollars because people work on research functions and they don't have access to the information. That searching is a huge issue when you work in this kind of space. So what I'm excited for is smaller models that are and hopefully not having this whole centralized way where AWS is controlling the whole architecture because it's money thing. Indexing is very expensive for any of RAG
Yeah.
models that they're using out of the box, fully managed models from AWS. That's very indexing is expensive. So I'm hoping we will be able to do this in a much more smaller model fashion. I'm excited for more reasoning models where that are smaller and more where they take more test time compute, which is they focus less on the size of like the large compute and actually take more time to understand the answer and come up with like a more logical overview and reason when they give out an answer. And actually also hoping when they also get better at prompting because it's hard to train everyone on the prompting aspect and not everyone is as effective. So I'm hoping they if you ask a question, how do I prompt this, I'm hoping that they will also train you on prompting aspects, like this is how you prompt me. So
Yeah.
that's one other hope I have.
Yeah. Likewise. I agree. All right, Pravi, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. We only got to about half of what I was hoping to cover, but it was great. I loved all the side channels we went down here, all the rabbit holes.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
All right, stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to talk vulnerability management life cycles with Matthew Toussaint from Open Security.